Okay, here we go. We're going to start talking about the properties of addition and multiplication. Most of these properties you probably already know, and you're like, oh, I got this. But I'm just going to put a name to these properties so you know what we name them. The first property is called the closure property of addition. Pretty much what it says is if you have A and B, if these are real numbers, if you add A and B, you're going to get a real number. So if you have 1 and 2 and you add them, you're going to get 3, which is also a real number. So that's the closure property of addition. And the same is true for multiplication. If you have two real numbers, A and B, and A is multiplied by B, you're also going to get a real number. It's called the closure property. Okay. The next property we have is the commutative property. What it says is if you have two real numbers, A and B, right here, if you take A plus B, it's equal to B plus A. So if you have 1 plus 2, this is the same thing as 2 plus 1. They're the same thing. It's called the commutative property. And there's a very similar commutative property for multiplication. If you have A times B, that equals to B times A. So if you have 1 times 2, that's the same thing as 2 times 1. You can swap them around. It's called the commutative property. The next property is the associative property. The one for addition goes like this. If you are going to group the A plus B and then add the C, and you're just adding these all, that's the same thing as having the A and but adding that to B plus C, and you're doing this part first. So you can do this first or this first, and you'll get the same exact thing. It's the associative property of addition. A very similar one for multiplication. You can change the order where you multiply things around. If you multiply the A times B first and then multiply by the C, that's the same thing as multiplying the B times the C first and then multiplying by the A, if these were all real numbers. So that's the associative property of addition and multiplication. Then there's the identity property. So identity property is kind of like obvious in some ways, but it's really saying that there is a number 0 such that if you take A, which is a real number, say A is 2, and add 0 to it, you're going to get 2 again. So 0 plus A is equal to 2. The identity property is pretty much saying if you add 0 to a number, you're going to get that number out. Okay? That's what the identity property of addition is. The identity property of multiplication says it's a little bit different. It's not multiplying by 0. What do you have to multiply a number by to get that same number out? Well, in this situation, you're multiplying it by 1. So if you say you have 3, that's your number, you multiply it by 1, you'll get 3 out. So that's the identity property of multiplication. We got the inverse property. It says for every real number A, there is a real number negative A such that A plus negative A is equal to 0. So really what this is saying is if we have 2, if we add negative 2, we should get 0. Or if we have 4 and we add negative 4, we should get 0. And that turns out to be true, right? 4 plus negative 4 is like 4 minus 4, and that's 0. 2 plus negative 2 is like 2 minus 2, and that's 0. And that's pretty much what this property is saying, the inverse property of addition. Now let's check out the inverse property of multiplication. It says for every non-zero number A, there is a real number 1 over A such that A times the 1 over A equals 1. So I'll give you an example of that one. So any non-zero real number A, let's say is 2. If we take that 2 and multiply it by 1 over 2, we should get 1. That's what it's saying. So 2 times 1/2, well what's 1/2 of 2? 1/2 of 2 is just 1, so that checks out. Let's try it with 3. So if you take 3 and you multiply it by 1 over 3, you get 1. So what is 1/3 of 3? Yeah, 1/3 of 3 is 1 because he kind of cancels out, leaves you with the 1. So that's what this property is talking about. And the last one that you guys know is the distributive property. We've used this many times. It really says if you have A times B plus C, that is equal to AB, right? Multiplying it, plus AC, multiplying that out. Okay? Really, it's just saying you can distribute this A to here and here. When you distribute it right there, you get this. And when you distribute it right here, you get that. Okay? It also says, it looks like here you can have it on the other side too. It's kind of like it's combining these two properties, the commutative property along with the associative property to make this distributive property. So those are some properties of real numbers for both addition and multiplication.